It was the very first day of human existence. The Garden of Eden had just a few days ago burst into bloom, and with each passing day, creation was bursting into life. Adam and Eve were taking their first breaths, enjoying their first hours upon this new earth. New possibility, new promise, new potential. But then Adam notices that something about the earth, all sunlight and joy, is beginning to change. At first, the change is so gradual, he's not even sure it's really happening. But soon, Adam feels what may have been the first human experience of fear. The change is happening all around him. He can no longer deny it. He has only been alive for less than a day, so we'll forgive him for not understanding what was happening. He only understood what he was seeing, that the sky was growing dark. In the passage from the Talmud that imagines this story, Adam cries out in fear and in sorrow, "Alas, the world is becoming dark all around me." Here's what the darkness means to Adam. The world before creation, before God said, "Let there be light." And so when he sees the sky grow dark, Adam thinks the world is ending. He thinks it is all ending, everything he has learned to love about this beautiful earth and his place in it. He spends the whole night weeping. And he fasts, because fasting was seen long ago, and still today, still tonight for some of us in this room, as part of the way that we might summon God's mercy. On Rosh Hashanah, I spoke about the sorrow of this past year, how sometimes tears felt like the closest thing to words that I could summon. The story of Adam's weeping at first nightfall is a story of sorrow. It's also a story of fear, the pit in our stomachs that most of us recognize from this past year. But tonight I want to focus on something else too, because here is the detail in the story that has been haunting me for months now. Haya yoshev b'ta'anit uvocha kol halayla, the Talmud describes. All night he fasted and he was crying. V'chava bocha kenegdo, and Eve was crying opposite him. Eve is there too. She is also crying, but separately. As Rabbi Avi Straussberg notes, rather than come together in their fear and comfort each other, they drew apart from each other, Adam in his corner and Eve in hers, their tears falling separately. The Talmud story of the first human experience of sorrow and the first human experience of fear is fundamentally a story about loneliness. There are only two human beings on the whole earth, and in their pain, they push each other away. More than anything else, this is what I have been hearing from you over this past year. How alone you have felt in your sorrow or your fear. We have been weeping like Adam this year, and we have felt the same fear in our hearts that the Talmud imagines him having. This past year, I have listened to and shared your grief over those murdered on October 7th, as well as those who were so brutally raped and killed and kidnapped. Your anguish over the hostages who still remain in captivity and the horrific loss of innocent life in Gaza. I have listened to and shared your fear over the surge in anti-Semitic incidents here in America and around the world, over what it means when a swastika is painted outside Temple Beth Hillel, Beth El, right in our own backyard, when a student group at Columbia University takes back their apology. Yes, they said this week, they actually really meant it when they said that Zionists don't deserve to live. When here too in Philadelphia, some students and others marched through the streets on the first anniversary of October 7th, no less, carrying banners with images of guns and paragliding terrorists while chanting support for the murders. I spent this year grieving, wrestling, and worrying too. My children were in preschool and aftercare at other Jewish institutions last year. And this winter, I shared with you when both of those institutions were vandalized. At my daughter's aftercare, the director of the program had to send an email out to parents asking if anyone could come over and help her paint over the graffiti before the kids showed up. They covered it over with a beautiful message of inclusion, of course. This summer, I told you about how a former mentor of mine, a progressive rabbi in Park Slope, Brooklyn, was disinvited from an event he was supposed to lead at a local bookstore, discussing a book about the Jewish future, because an employee at the store decided that no Zionist, even a liberal Zionist and a peace activist, should be on their stage. It has been a sad and frightening year to be a Jew. But what I want to focus on tonight is what I have heard from you even more than the sadness, even more than the fear, how lonely it has been to be a Jew this year. For many of you, what made the pain of last year so much worse was the feeling of distance or even abandonment by friends, neighbors, and colleagues outside of the Jewish community after the October 7th attacks. Some of you told me about friends who seemed to disappear temporarily after October 7th, or who just didn't show much sympathy or interest in listening. Some of this played out on social media. An old classmate who wrote cruel comments on a post you shared about the hostages and then promptly unfriended you. Some of it played out in the workplace. You started eating at your desk, avoiding lunches with colleagues because their comments at a recent meeting, their posts on social media, or a sticker on their desk made you dread the small talk. Some of you who have devoted energy to progressive causes felt abandoned by people with whom you had stood in solidarity on other issues. Some of you felt new awkwardness being a Jew in circles that are important to other parts of your identity, like LGBTQ circles. The loneliness was in sharp relief for some of our college students. One college student told me how lonely she felt after October 7th when she tried to talk to her friends, many of whom were involved in liberal activism on campus for various causes that she agreed with. It was so lonely, she said to me, trying to explain how the October 7th attack had shaken her, and so hurtful that any sympathy they seemed to have seemed to be used up after just a few days. Another student described the loneliness of sitting in class while a professor made an offhand remark that was supportive of Hamas, and none of his classmates registered any objection. Another student decided how she had hesitated to visit Hillel for much of the year because it was easier to hide her Jewish identity from her peers. While she struggled internally with a complex swirl of emotions, she sensed that there was no easy way to share that complexity in such a polarized environment. Another student, one of ours, staged a one-man counter-protest to the anti-Israel encampment at his school, standing with an Israeli flag and singing songs of peace. He had invited other Jewish friends to come with him, he told me, but they backed out when they realized that nobody else was coming. Nobody except him. Another student told me just this week how she has been wearing a necklace with an outline of Israel on it but how scared she feels walking around campus since 2 of her good friends have been attacked by protesters. It feels like only really the Jewish community is affected, she texted me, and nobody else seems to care. Another painful aspect of this aloneness is that it is sometimes coming from within our own Jewish community. At some moments over the past year, our Jewish community has supported each other in many important ways, just as the wider community and some of our friends have. But many other times, we as a community have fallen into the same trap that Adam and Eve did. In our time of sorrow and fear, we have turned away from each other. For some of us, the Jewish community has also felt like a lonely place this year. One student described to me how homeless she felt on campus this past year, caught between activists on both the pro-Israel and the pro-Palestinian side who were so strident, nobody talking about the nuance that was so important to her. Where was there space, she wondered, where she could stand in solidarity with both Israelis and Palestinians who were suffering, where she could support the state of Israel's right to exist, but not its policies? Another student described to me how she felt called to join the encampment at her school, not despite but because of her Jewish values, she told me. But even as she felt strongly about being there, she didn't feel fully at home there either. She disagreed with some of what was being said and struggled to balance her Jewish identity with her concern over Palestinian suffering. Here in our local community, I know that some of you have also felt this kind of loneliness. For many of you, this has played out in your families as different generations of your family found yourselves divided over Israel, in some cases in ways that felt almost impossible to talk about. Some of you, on both the political left and the right, shared with me that you weren't sure there were people at Beth David who shared your perspective about Israel, and you weren't sure how comfortable it would be for you to try and talk together. And for a handful of you, part of the experience of this past year was the shock of being criticized or even threatened by other Jews who questioned your loyalty to the Jewish people or the integrity of your Jewish identity, an experience that broke my heart this past year. When it feels like the world is against us, when it feels like the world has gone mad, when we are in so much pain over a world that is crashing down, it is easy to turn inward, to surround ourselves only with the people who agree most with us, and wall ourselves off from others. But we are gathered here on Yom Kippur, a day when we are taught to prioritize connection, community, and reconciliation. One rabbinic teaching offers that the true purpose of apologizing to each other on Kol Nidre is not primarily forgiveness, but reconciliation, to bring us closer to each other when we have been estranged. The Kol Nidre prayer that we prayed this evening comes with a kind of Jewish antidote to cancel culture. We affirm that all of us are part of this community. No matter our sins, we all pray as one. It would be easy for a holiday focused on self-affliction and personal reflection to be a lonely holiday, each of us somewhere on our own mountain. But instead, our tradition teaches us to come together. The Talmud tells us the story of Adam and Eve crying alone to help us understand, I think, how prone we are as humans to act this way. But the promise of the High Holy Days is that we are not destined to stay stuck in the same behaviors as the year before. We have the ability to make different choices, even when they are hard, and to repair relationships that were strained in the year before. The word teshuva means repentance, but it also means turning. Tonight, I want to suggest 3 ways that we can turn toward others to make this year a less lonely one. First, this is not the year to withdraw from engaging with the wider world beyond the Jewish community. This is the year to double down on building bridges. We need to reach out to our neighbors even when they don't understand our perspectives, even when the conversations are difficult. We don't have to start with the hardest bridges, with people who demonize us, who have no interest in listening, or those who support violence. I know those voices have been loud this year, but they are not the majority. There are many more people with whom we have had hard moments this past year, people who didn't show up for us when we hoped or expected they would, or who said things about Jews or about Israel that felt so hurtful, that were biased or misinformed. But they can still be our partners in the work of rebuilding relationships. It is not a betrayal of our principles to talk to them. It is the only way to move forward. If you have spent much of this past year avoiding this kind of conversation because the sky was so dark and it felt like everything was crashing down, that is more than understandable. But we can't stay in our own corner. We need to find ways of talking honestly, but not with hostility, with those with whom we disagree, and learn to share what it is like for us personally to be a Jew in America right now, and also to be able to listen to them. I know these conversations won't be easy, but it is essential that we engage in them because we can only dismantle anti-Semitism by working hand in hand with all of our neighbors and with other marginalized people against all forms of bigotry. Anti-Semitism doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is part of the machinery of division and fear that some people and leaders have long used for their own benefit. We cannot do this alone. I hope that all of you will find ways in this coming year to reach out to your friends and neighbors as individuals and also on the communal level. I'm so proud of our Beth David member, Lisa Schreiber, who has been leading conversations around anti-Semitism with the leadership of Tredyffrin Township for over a year now. And Anna Shurak, a member of the Lower Merion School Board, who has been working so diligently to lead school board conversations with compassion and respect after a recent school board meeting became divisive. Last night, I was proud to attend a meeting bringing together a group of Jewish and African American leaders from Lower Merion to learn from each other and to reaffirm the commitment we all feel to working together and to strengthening our community. Our interfaith work at Beth David has also been an important part of this outreach for me. Our neighbor and friend, Pastor Todd Stavrakis, is a national leader in helping his colleagues in the Presbyterian Church to understand and to listen to Jewish experiences. He and I will once again be leading interfaith Torah and Bible study together twice through the next month, once here at Beth David and once at Gladwin Presbyterian Church. I hope you'll consider joining us. Second, if we want to be less lonely this year and in the future, we need to help repair the institutions and organizations that bring us together. John Powell, the founder of the Othering Institute, describes these as containers, everything from clubs and organizations to the strength of our democracy. When there is a crack in the container, he writes, when the context in which we live is broken, our trust is challenged and everyone feels othered. It has been easier for malicious actors to use anti-Semitism to divide us because of the larger challenges facing our society, the sharp rise in polarization, the threats to our democracy, the increase in political violence, and the decrease in participation of many communal organizations that bring people together across lines of difference. A strong and vibrant democracy is essential for our ability to help build the bridges I described. And it is also vital for our safety. A study of Jewish history makes it clear how vulnerable Jews are under conditions of polarization, authoritarianism, or the erosion of the rule of law. I was proud to add my name to an interfaith letter by clergy across Pennsylvania, condemning divisive political rhetoric, misinformation, political violence, and emphasizing the need to talk to each other across lines of difference. And I'm especially proud that our work at Beth David with RAC Pennsylvania, the statewide Reform Social Justice Initiative that we helped to found, has been hard at work at a nonpartisan campaign to support strong voter turnout and ensure a fair and secure election this year. I hope that you'll consider phone banking with us next weekend when we'll do it together in person. There's also phone and text banking that you can do from home at other times. And I hope you might also consider us joining a few days after the phone banking for an online workshop about preventing election sabotage. And finally, if you want to help build a world without anti-Semitism, without hatred of Jews, you need to deepen your own love for the Jewish people. In Hebrew, Ahavat Yisrael. Loving the Jewish community and Judaism is not a distraction from loving others in the world. It is a path toward building the muscles of compassion and community that will help us love others more deeply too. But sometimes we Reform Jews are so enthusiastic about our universalism that we tend to fall a little short in our commitment to our own people. I know that for many of you, your pride in being Jewish has been one of the anchors that has helped you through this past year. I want to challenge you in the coming year to do more than just be proud to be Jewish in the abstract. I want you to work on deepening your own connection to the concrete people who are part of our Jewish family. That means focusing more on caring for each other as a Jewish community. We need to do a better job of showing up for each other at funerals, at Shiva, when someone we know is sick. We need you to show up and fry latkes for the kids at Hebrew school, or take the time to meet our newest members at the new member Shabbat dinner later this month. Some of you already help to bring meals or volunteer in other ways through our caring community led by Sue Endy. If you haven't helped before, we always need more volunteers. Loving each other as a Jewish community also means committing to conversations with each other, even when we disagree in passionate ways. The anguish of this past year has sometimes increased the stridency with which some of us spoke, or led us to act in ways that were not our best selves. This is the season of repair and forgiveness. Let's give each other some grace and move forward. For millennia, Judaism has been a tradition of passionate disagreement. The rabbis of the Talmud taught us to see differences of opinion not as threats to our community, but as opportunities for all of us to learn and for our community as a whole to grow wiser. On October 29th, I hope you'll join me for a dinner conversation to come together across our political differences and talk about Israel. On November 7th, after the election, I hope you'll join us for a gathering to bring our community together, no matter what the result. And finally, I want to suggest that one more way you might deepen your connection to the Jewish people, your own sense of Ahavat Yisrael, is through Torah study, immersing yourselves in the ideas of our people over the centuries and millennia. The beauty of Jewish tradition is that we are never alone because we are a conversation with so many generations who came before us. If you have taken college-level courses in the writers and philosophers of other cultures, but your Jewish education is more limited. Hebrew school, maybe confirmation, maybe an adult ed class here or there, then it's time for you to fall in love with the wisdom of Jewish thinkers and to steep yourself in their approach to intellectual pluralism. Come join us on Saturday morning for Torah study, peruse the adult education brochure, or reach out to me and tell me what you'd love to learn. Just like the Talmud story of Adam and Eve's first nightfall, our rich tradition has so much to teach us about life today. This past year was a lonely year to be a Jew, but the new year offers us a promise of a Shana Tova Yoter, a better year ahead. Elie Wiesel wrote that God taught Adam a secret, not how to begin, but how to begin again. That lesson has been embedded in Jewish consciousness by the promise of Yom Kippur. We can heal rifts. We can heal relationships. We can come together. The world is so dark, friends. We need each other. May this be a year of coming together.